Welcome to the Tuesday edition of the Sharp Football Show. How's everybody doing today? Thank you guys for tuning in. About 1 minute late, but over at Sharp Football Analysis on YouTube, you're able to go ahead and check out everything that we've got going on there. Got a little bit of audio interruption there. Apologize for that, but feel free to go over to the YouTube, Sharp Football Analysis. Search for us there. You can participate in the chat. You can ask your questions. You can share your comments. We'll pop them up on the screen. I love interacting with everybody over at Sharp Football Analysis on YouTube to get involved. We are just off of a successful free week. I wish it was even better than what it was, but we still produced profit. I want to say 27-19 was the final record there for free week. And we got more great things in store for you guys soon. We are about to embark upon probably the best 10-day run, in my opinion, maybe 13-day run of football here as it relates to, we've got Thanksgiving, and I don't know about you guys, but Thanksgiving for me is one of like the apex holidays in my life, right? Because you've got family, you've got football, and you've got food, like the three F's in my opinion. And you've got that all day long. And they're starting to now put more games on Christmas and, on Netflix, and we got concerts and all these types of things. But Thanksgiving, where you're just like relaxing and eating football and drinking and cooking and feasting all day long, one of the best holidays. So that's Thursday, a week from this Thursday. I can't believe it's that quick of a turnaround. We're already here into the Thanksgiving time frame. So really going to be looking forward to that. There's some great games between now and then, especially this Monday Night Football game, which we're going to talk about a lot momentarily. But we've got a huge show on deck for you guys. We're going to be breaking down a lot of things. The state of the New York Jets. We're going to be breaking down Brian Daboll and the New York Giants. Both these teams in New York giving us a ton to talk about. Sort of wish that we could discuss these teams in better light. The fans of those teams both are tired of talking about their teams being frustrating and failures, but we got to talk about what the current state is of both of those teams and the decision to go to Tommy DeVito, what that means for the New York Giants' future, what it means for Brian Daboll. We're also going to talk a lot about that Monday night game. We're going to be talking about Lamar Jackson. We're going to be talking about Arthur Smith and how he changed up his game plan momentarily. We're going to be talking about how we're seeing Mike Tomlin continue to have a lot of success against Lamar Jackson, and what that means for the future of that series, in addition to what it might mean for this upcoming game and how the Chargers might be able to steal some things or where Lamar could have some success against the Chargers. So a lot to discuss, certainly getting ready to dive into it. Make sure that you like and subscribe over on YouTube. And Matt, let's go ahead and get into our first comment. All right, so this Steelers game against the Baltimore Ravens, coming off of that game, certainly saw a number of analysts talking about the fact that this was exactly what the Ravens were expecting. The Steelers offense did what they wanted to do, imposed their will, won the game. And I couldn't disagree more, respectfully. This was not what the Ravens probably were expecting, because it was a change of pace of what the Steelers were going to do and what they had been doing all season long. So first, I want to go back to what we were discussing last week on the Tuesday show, gave you 5-6 days of advance notice about what we were going to get in this game and what the biggest concerns that I had were. And I want to fly through these graphics really quickly and then show you what ended up happening on Sunday for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and specifically what Arthur Smith did very well to have success. So Matt, let's go ahead and bring up that first graphic from last week with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And this graphic showed, you guys remember this from last week, the Baltimore Ravens down there at the bottom left corner as to the lower rate of pressure and lower rate of blitzing on early downs. Matt, go to the second graphic. This graphic showed the Baltimore Ravens over there on the far right as being a team on third down that blitzes a lot more and puts a lot more pressure on the opposing quarterback. So not much pressure on early downs, a ton of pressure on third down. Matt, go to the third one. And this was my concern heading into last week's game, is the Pittsburgh Steelers. You could see them on the far left in the bottom left quadrant. They had one of the lowest dropback rates. That means they ran the football with their running backs on early downs. That's what we're looking at here. In all four quarters of the games, they are a very run-focused team. They run the ball at the second highest rate. And you're going up against a very good run defense, and you're going to then be passing the ball a lot on third down when the Ravens are getting a lot more pressure. So I wanted the Pittsburgh Steelers. I said, if they're going to have some success in this game, they need to figure out a way to not be as run heavy on these early downs. So now let's pivot to what happened in week 11. Matt, go to the next graphic. Don't look at the left because you won't find the Pittsburgh Steelers there. Look all the way at the far right. This is amazing what Arthur Smith decided to do against the Baltimore Ravens. He came out on early downs in the first half of this game to try to get a little bit of a lead and was the number one highest pass rate in the NFL, edging the Dallas Cowboys by like 0.2 of a percentage point in terms of their pass rate on early downs. Went from one of the highest run rates to the highest pass rate in this particular game. Absolutely what you want to do against the Baltimore Ravens on early downs. And this is exactly what the Los Angeles Chargers are going to need to do. We'll pivot to that game momentarily, but that's what the Chargers are going to need to do on Monday Night Football this upcoming week. So, Matt, go to the next graphic. This is what Russell Wilson did versus the Baltimore Ravens. Early downs versus third down. So take a gander at this. First of all, note how many dropbacks he had on early downs. 27 dropbacks, only 13 on third downs. Look at how much better his EPA per dropback and his success rate were on these early down passes. Plus 0.01 EPA per dropback when he passed the ball on early downs versus minus 0.79 on third down. His completion rate was 72% on early downs, was only 45% on third down. His yards per attempt, 6.5 on early downs, only 3.8 on third down. He had a very low, this was the key. You're right, Exile. This was the key. Sack to interception ratio. Only 7.4% of his dropbacks resulted in a sack or interception on early downs versus 23% on third down. Absolutely, you could not be more diametrically opposed. Early down efficiency versus third down efficiency. And imagine if Arthur Smith decided not to go as pass heavy on early downs and tried to run the ball more and then go into all these third downs and try to convert first downs with Russell Wilson. That would have lost them the game for sure. You know that the Baltimore Ravens almost won this game if they had a field goal kicker who could kick and make field goals in Justin Tucker. But just absolutely ridiculous. And Chris, I just saw that. That's why I kind of fumbled. We'll get to that in a second. So, Matt, go to the last graphic here. I think we've got one more in this section, or here we go. Okay. If you drop the banner, the yellow banner, if possible, so we can see the bottom. I'm not sure if you can do that, but there you go. Thank you. This is the Chargers' early down pass rate by week. And for those that know, Justin Herbert was banged up entering the season, banged up early on in the season. They were not passing the ball as much on early downs. And we are seeing this kind of trend. It's not perfect. There's spikes in different weeks. But we are seeing a general trend towards a lot more passing for the LA Chargers. So I think that's the last one, Matt. Correct me and bring it back to me if that is. But what we are seeing here is the importance of the LA Chargers to take a page out of Arthur Smith and the Pittsburgh Steelers book when the Chargers are on offense. And they must pass the ball a lot on early downs. They are going to have a lot of problems with their third down efficiency if they try to wait and throw the ball on third down and don't run it enough on early downs. The trend is better for them. The trend is moving in the right direction for them to attack the weakness of the Baltimore Ravens defense and pass the ball on early downs, they must come out and do that more frequently. Absolutely imperative that they come out and do that more frequently in this game, just like Arthur Smith did. Remember, Arthur Smith went from one of the lowest pass rates, one of the highest run rates, to the highest pass rate in the NFL when he went up against this Baltimore Ravens defense on early downs in the first half of the game. The Chargers need to come out on early downs and jack up that pass rate, just like Arthur Smith and the Pittsburgh Steelers did. So kudos, first of all, to Arthur Smith making that massive change. We implored him to do it. We said, you must do this if you want to have success. We said the key thing that the Steelers must do if they want to beat the Baltimore Ravens is to increase their pass rate on early downs. We weren't sure if they were going to do it. Arthur Smith did it. Massive kudos to him. It's on to you now, Greg Roman and the LA Chargers and Justin Herbert. You've got to do the same thing if you want to have success against the Baltimore Ravens this upcoming week. We are going to be talking about the Joe Douglas. I actually have a whole little thing for the New York Jets later on in the show. And actually, it doesn't even relate to Joe Douglas that much. It relates to Woody Johnson, who is taking pass after pass and not getting enough fingers pointed at Woody Johnson for the debacle that's happening with the New York Jets. We're going to get into all those details momentarily. I want to get into why Mike Tomlin keeps beating Lamar Jackson real quick and what that means for this upcoming week. And then we'll get into Coach Kevin Kelley, who is backstage ready for us. We will get to him in a moment. But Matt, let's go ahead and let's start the next topic here. I want to talk about Lamar Jackson and Mike Tomlin. So Lamar Jackson is in for a big turnaround, in my opinion, on Monday Night Football against the LA Chargers. But before we get to why that is, let's talk about what happened, what the Pittsburgh Steelers do that befuddles and causes problems for Lamar Jackson. We already hinted at this. If you guys are a longtime listener or at least a short-term listener, you were here with us last week, you already know some of this, but I just want to bring it back to the forefront of your brain for a second. Matt, can you bring up this next graphic? Which, by the way, guys, make sure that you are over on YouTube and subscribing to the show, because then you'll get alerts and you'll see all this all the time. Sharp Football Analysis, hit subscribe. Give us a thumbs up, please, if you don't mind, as well, while you are there. But the Pittsburgh Steelers, off to the right, use one of the higher rates of man coverage in the NFL. One of the higher rates. Specifically, they love to roll out their cover one, and they do it at a very high rate, one of the highest rates of any team in the NFL. This is what causes problems for Lamar Jackson. They blitz and they play a lot of cover one. Now, the Chargers are on the exact opposite end of the spectrum here. The Chargers play the third lowest rate of man coverage. They play a ton of zone. They are constantly living in zone coverage. So, Matt, go to the next graphic. Here is the performance in passing efficiency on early downs for all 32 teams. Man coverage on the x-axis, zone coverage in the y-axis. So I want to note a few things for you here. First of all is where Baltimore Ravens sit. Baltimore Ravens have the second worst performance in the NFL passing the football against man coverage on early downs. You see it on left to right. Only the Colts are worse passing the football, man coverage in early downs. But Baltimore Ravens have by far the best efficiency when they pass versus zone coverage on early downs. They are significantly better this year playing against zone coverage compared to other years and compared to all other teams in the NFL. The other thing that you can note on this graphic that I like to do as I'm making and building these graphics all the time throughout every single week is the difference. So that green line that's running from lower left to top right, that is the line of neutrality where you have no splits, man versus zone coverage, at least based on EPA per attempt. You see at the bottom left, we intersect the numbers there. minus 0.2 EPA per attempt versus man coverage, and minus 0.2 EPA per attempt versus zone coverage. You go all the way to the top right, where does that green line intersect? Plus 0.6 EPA per attempt versus man coverage, plus 0.6 EPA per attempt versus zone coverage. No difference, man or zone coverage at all, okay? The further away you are from that green line that runs from lower left to top right, the further away you are in a perpendicular fashion, the bigger your splits are. And so the Baltimore Ravens are the furthest away from that line in terms of having the largest splits versus man versus zone coverage. So not only are they the best in the NFL against zone coverage, not only are they second worst against man coverage, but they also have the largest splits in the NFL. Go to the next graphic, Matt. Okay, here we see, now you're starting to see this stark contrast being continued to be developed and fostered. Too high coverage. The usage rate of too high, you see the Chargers over there next to the Minnesota Vikings, or basically on top of the Minnesota Vikings, as by far the two teams that utilize the most too high coverage on early downs in the NFL. By far. No other team is above like 53%. They're above or right around 63% usage rate of too high on early downs. Look where the Pittsburgh Steelers are. Lowest in the NFL. They don't use too high at all. They use it on 25%, the lowest rate of any team in the NFL. Next graphic. And look now at the efficiency gained out of too high. Too high is on the x-axis. Your EPA per attempt versus too high is on the x-axis. Your EPA per attempt versus anything other than too high. We're not just cover 2. It's all too high. Cover 4, cover 6, 2-man. That's all along the x-axis. Along the y-axis is everything else, right? Your cover 1, 3s, etc. And you could see the Baltimore Ravens are by far the number one best offense in the NFL passing the football on early downs against too high. And yes, they're still fourth best, I believe, against non-too high. They're still quite good. But once again, see that neutral line, that's the green line going from lower left to top right, and how far the Ravens are, how long of a line that light green line is. It's the largest in the NFL, meaning no other team drops off more in terms of EPA per attempt when they don't face too high compared to when they do face too high. They have the largest splits in terms of pure EPA. They're pushing right around plus 0.55, plus 0.56 EPA versus too high. Versus non-too high, it's right around plus 0.2. Okay, that's a big split. It's the largest in the NFL. So that's it for this one. You can go to the next one, which is back to me, Matt. Bottom line here is that the Baltimore Ravens, this is why Mike Tomlin has a lot of success against Lamar Jackson. He plays a lot of man coverage. He blitzes a lot. And this is what was my concern about Lamar. I've done shows in prior weeks discussing the fact that Baltimore and Lamar Jackson specifically has done a lot better against blitzes. But that is versus zone blitzes. Versus man blitzes, he is still struggling a ton, just like he has in years past. And that was a big question that I introduced to you guys last Friday and mentioned that Lamar's got to do better against these cover 1 blitzes. And he didn't. He struggled a ton still defending the man blitzes from Mike Tomlin last Sunday. But guess what? So that's like in the past. And it's going to happen the next time he plays the Pittsburgh Steelers. And it's going to happen when he plays any other team that utilizes low rates of cover 2 and high rates of man blitzing. There are a couple other teams out there similar to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Not many, though, thankfully, for Lamar Jackson. If other teams start stealing pages out of that book, it might hurt Baltimore's overall ceiling. But the Chargers are exact opposite of the Pittsburgh Steelers. You saw that one graph. Instead of running at the lowest rate of too high, they have tied for the highest rate of too high. And Lamar Jackson has the biggest splits against too high. This is the reason why I think Lamar Jackson is going to have a lot more success this upcoming week against the LA Chargers. It's part of the reason why that total, if you're looking at that total for the Ravens-Chargers game, was at 48. is now up to 51 at a lot of spots and 51.5 at some spots. I just see right now at South Point in Las Vegas, it's now all the way up to 51.5. It's because this is a totally different defense and a totally different scheme that doesn't frustrate the Ravens and Lamar Jackson. They have a lot of success against this style of defense. Now, I know the Chargers defense statistically looks good, but take a look at who they played. Take a look at the efficiency from the Cincinnati Bengals and how they destroyed that defense of the Chargers. Chargers also has some injuries on their game in addition on Sunday night. And then, think about, like I just mentioned, the Chargers offense, how they could take a page out of the Steelers playbook and what Arthur Smith did well, pass the ball more on early downs and have success doing that. They better do that if they want to try to keep pace with the Baltimore Ravens. That should be a great game on Monday. So last week, I gave you the early preview. Nobody else was digging into the X's and O's yet for the Ravens-Steelers game. But last Tuesday at noon, we did that. Now we just broke down the X's and O's for the Ravens-Chargers game on Monday night. So we're working days and days in advance of this thing for you guys, but can't wait for this game. I'm sure there'll be more to discuss on it next on the Friday show at noon Eastern. With all of that said, let's go ahead and welcome on our guest, Coach Kevin Kelley. All right, we welcome in Coach Kevin Kelley in the laboratory. Coach, looks great. You're prepping. No windows in that room. Just what I love from a ball coach. It's just a whiteboard behind you, and you're in your creative genius there. First of all, thank you for joining us. For those of you guys that don't know, Coach Kelley, this is his second appearance on the show this year. Last time he came on, we played a nice intro from Bill Belichick, who has obviously employed Coach Kelley in the past as a consultant and has worked with the New England Patriots previously. Coach Kelley also, obviously, a 9-time state champion for high school football, known as the coach who never punts. So you guys know him well, and you guys loved him on the show last time that we brought him over here. Exile says coach and gives you the crown there. So welcome back, Coach Kelley. Before we get into some of the topics that you sent, I got a couple others for you. Any thoughts on what I was presenting there with regard to the Pittsburgh Steelers and some of the changeup that they made against the Ravens to pass the ball a little bit more, and then kind of early thoughts on that Chargers-Ravens matchup that you see unfolding next Monday night?
Yeah, number one, it was great. I love watching this and watching the show and watching you break down the X's and O's. If you go into you talked about the week before Pittsburgh having to quit running the ball on early downs, and now they've got a quarterback in Russell Wilson, and we talked about this last time I was on because it was Russell Wilson was about to take over for Justin Fields. And you can trust him with the ball. I mean, he's played for years. He's been in Super Bowls. He's been in a situation they can trust him on early downs more. I think it's been a while since they've had somebody they felt super comfortable doing that, and you showed it paid off. And you look and you go, okay, they didn't score any touchdowns. And oddly enough, I saw a graphic today where Pittsburgh's 2-2 when they don't score any touchdowns, and the rest of the league is 2-10. But what they did do is they had 6 good drives that ended up in field goals. And then they had another really good drive where Russ very uncharacteristically threw that interception in the end zone. But I think you hit the nail right on the head. I think it takes the pressure off the offensive line if they'll throw the ball on early downs because it's quick throws, it gets it out, it's play action, which everybody knows is the best EPA play in football. And it just takes the pressure off the offensive line. Everybody talks about taking the pressure off the quarterback, but when you run the ball and they know you're going to run the ball on first down, that puts the pressure on the offensive line. So I thought it was great. I think, flip it over to the other side real quick and watch what Pittsburgh did to Lamar Jackson. And I think Lamar's got to take a page out of Josh Allen's book. And if you watch and you may be going to get into this later, I don't want to get much into it, but when Josh Allen sees man-to-man defense of any kind, he picks the open gap, A gap or B gap on the right or left side. A lot of times he takes the snap and just takes one step back and takes off running on an unplanned run. And he's taken advantage that immediately the defenders are going to turn their back. I think Lamar needs to do that a little bit more on his own, and that would get him out of some of these man blitzes that he's not having as much success against in the passing game.
Yeah, I agree, Coach. One of the offensive coaches that I worked with in the NFL, when we were facing a defense that was really good, especially on second and third downs against tight ends and against running backs out of the backfield, especially the tight ends, and sometimes even wide receivers, it was because some of those defenses had their linebackers just almost turn their back on the pocket and immediately focus on the route concepts and what was going to be expected. And as a result, I noticed on the film that if your quarterback took like his quick drop and then immediately just started running, just immediately take off after he hits that back foot, those backers are moved out of the way and they're not focused on the quarterback run game at that moment. They're focused on what's the concept? How is this route? How are these couple of routes off to the left or the right? How are they working? And they lose sight of that. And you can get a lot of yardage when you're going up against some of those defenses. And I'm going to mention one of them, the San Francisco 49ers with Fred Warner. I mean, they were so good at stopping passes and so good at efficiency on passes on those second and third downs. It's because a lot of times Warner just wasn't even focusing on what the quarterback might do within a second or two of the snap. He's focused on the receivers or the concepts that were there. And so you do need to take advantage of that a little bit more, not just I'll drop back, I'll read out my first or second, and then I'll take off and scramble. The defense is better prepared for that. They're starting to swarm at that point. It's that immediate run after the snap that sometimes causes problems for them.
Yeah, and let me add this. The reason teams have to sometimes do that man-to-man defense with the linebackers on the tight ends, the running backs, and just turn their back is because they're not getting a good idea if the team that they're playing has a strong tendency to run on that down or pass on that down. So what you want to do is you want to take their eyes out of the backfield because play action, those linebackers, since they were 5 years old, if they've been playing football that long, they see that ball in the belly of the back and they come downhill and then he pulls it out and they're 2 steps behind the guy that they've got to guard, whether it's zone or man. So if you're not sure and they're more worried about the pass, they'll go to that man-to-man defense and give those guys a better chance. Well, that is what enables that quarterback to be able to take off running because at that time they have no idea what's going on in the backfield.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, I want to ask you a little bit about the NFC East. You've got one game that you think is going to determine the NFC East. What's that game?
That's going to be when the Redskins, or not Redskins, excuse me, formerly known as the Redskins, and the Eagles play. And the reason I say that one game matters all is if you look at the records right now, and then I went in and I was looking, and the Eagles have 3 for sure they're going to win games. And that's the Panthers, the Cowboys, and the Giants. They're going to win those games. The other games, they play at home versus Steelers, at Ravens, at Rams. All those are very losable games for them. And then they play that last game at Washington. So if you look at what their 3 guaranteed wins are, if they happen to stumble in those games that I mentioned that are the other games, that are the maybe losable games, the Redskins, here's what they've got left. They played Dallas twice. I'm marking both those down as wins. I'm going to say they find a way to beat Tennessee and Atlanta and go on the road to New Orleans and beat them because they're going to be favored probably in all those games. Give them those wins. The only game left is that home game versus Philly. And if they win that game, they're going to win the East. Now, that might be a little more far-fetched, but if things fall into place like they look like they're going to with the favored teams and Philadelphia stumbles, which they very likely could. This version of Philly that we're seeing, I'm not sure. I know they're in a 6-game winning streak. I'm not sure I buy into exactly how good this is making them look right now. I think it all comes down to that one game, and that's going to determine everything.
Yeah, we've got a huge game, Eagles at the Rams on Sunday Night Football, Coach. Right now, the Philadelphia Eagles are laying between 2.5 to 3 points. That total has been bet up. It was at 48. It's all the way up to 50.5 with a 50 showing up on the board. Right now, Vic Fangio is getting a lot more out of this defense of late, and it looks like some of those young draft picks that Howie Roseman made on that side of the football seem to really be paying off. Any early opinion on what we might get when we see the Philadelphia Eagles there out in LA on Sunday Night Football, taking on Sean McVay, Matthew Stafford, and that LA Rams offense.
Yeah, I think you're going to see a frustrated Eagles offense. I think you're going to see one that's used to, especially the last 6 games, controlling the time of possession. And I think the Rams are suited perfectly with Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp back. And I think their third game together, their third full game together, and Sean McVay, and they've got a good running game. I think you're going to see the Rams can control the clock. And as much as I love Jalen Hurts, when they're not out there controlling the line of scrimmage and controlling the possessions, I think then they have a sense of urgency that he doesn't feel comfortable with, and they try to do things that they haven't been doing the last 6 games. They force throws. They do some things out of the ordinary that they have not been showing that they're good at the last few weeks, and I think that's going to put them in some trouble. I think the Rams are going to win this game.
So there you go, Coach calling a shot on a Tuesday afternoon. If you do look at this Philadelphia Eagles offense, I'm looking at the defenses that they have played so far this season, and the Philadelphia Eagles have played the number one easiest schedule of opposing defenses this year, and especially this little run where we've seen them put up some nice statistics and win games by relatively large and comfortable margins. We are talking about they've gone up against the number 29 Cincinnati Bengals, the number 30, I'm talking about defenses here, number 29 Cincinnati Bengals defense, number 30 Jacksonville Jaguars defense, number 25 Dallas Cowboys defense, and number 26 Washington Commanders defense. So, I mean, it's not as if the Rams have a much better defense than those, but it does just put it into context that the Philadelphia Eagles have been dominating against some very, very lackluster defenses so far over this season. Number one, easiest schedule, but also particularly the last month of the calendar. Let's talk a little bit, Coach, about what we are going to see Monday Night Football. It's the LA Chargers. They're hosting the Baltimore Ravens. And you think that the Chargers have the team in place to make a run, but one thing must happen that hasn't happened in their losses. What is that one thing that you think needs to happen for the LA Chargers to kind of get to the level that they should be at if they want to go on this playoff run?
Yeah, it's really easy. I was looking back. I always try to look for a common theme, and then you watch the game Cincinnati. And this really brought it to my mind when Justin Herbert took off running. He ran for 65 yards the other night, and a couple of them are explosive plays. Over that 12-yard barrier that change possessions and things like that. But in the 3 games that they've lost, he's rushed for 0, 8, and 2 yards. 0, 8, and 2 yards in those losses. And if you want to go a little bit further and dive in on in the games that in the games that they've won, basically not even that. If you go back and you look at the games that he's ran the ball for more than 18 or more yards, they've averaged 29 points per game. In games where he's rushed for less than 18 yards, they've averaged 18 points per game, 11 yards less. Now, from a coaching standpoint, I can tell you a big thing that happens there is if he runs the ball early, which he did Monday night versus Baltimore. Versus not Baltimore. Freak. The Bengals. If he runs the ball early, that changes their defense. You see, Bengals had to put a spy on him. They put a spy on Justin Herbert, and I bet that hasn't been done too many times. Well, that takes another man out of coverage and kind of takes another man out of the running game from coming downhill really fast. And that he changes defenses. If he would learn that he could very much be like a Josh Allen, but get down a little sooner, don't take those punishments. It's shown 11 points per game difference on offense he makes if he just runs the ball a little bit.
Yeah, and it would be massive in this game against the Baltimore Ravens because that Ravens defense is so good defending running back runs that they may struggle on early down to defend quarterback runs. And the statistics show this. I've talked about it for a while now, shared it with coaches around the NFL. But the most efficient type of play in the entirety of the NFL is a designed pass play where the quarterback decides to scramble through an open run lane. Like you just mentioned, one of the gaps in that defensive front. If he scrambles for an open run lane after a designed pass play is called, that is the most efficient play. It has the highest floor in the NFL. It has a great ceiling. You're guaranteed yards much more than you were if you tried to read out the defense and pass it. The average per play is so much higher, and more teams need to lean into that. I know that like a lot of coaches with their, and I want to ask you about this, coach. You're working with a younger quarterback, and there's a give and take where you need to get them to improve their skills with reading out the defense, making their progressions, getting the ball to where it needs to go when it needs to go there. But then at the same time, when there's a run lane that presents itself, and now you can get a new set of downs, and now you get 3 more downs to do it all over again. I still argue that it's more efficient to take that layup, take that slam dunk, get those yards, and then we can work on you reading things out if there's not that open run lane. But how do you balance? It's not so much with Justin Herbert because he's a mature, more experienced quarterback at this stage of his career. So is Josh Allen, etc. But like some of these younger quarterbacks in year 1, year 2, where they're trying to learn how to read out the defense, but they have these open opportunities. What do you want a quarterback to do?
I think you're seeing exactly what you would have seen from a young Justin Fields versus a young Jayden Daniels. Jayden Daniels, even in that situation, he does run the ball and he runs it well, but he's looking to pass first, run second, and Justin Fields, of course, is looking to run first, even on called passing plays. The big difference is this: what you tell a quarterback with those guys' skills are you say, hey, look, you know, you do want to pass first if it's open and if it's a slam dunk like you called that run. You want to throw the ball first because the runs will always be there. They will always open themselves up during the game. The passes, sometimes you call pass plays and guys don't get open. Those are not there. So if those are there, throw it early. If they're not, and you do have that slam dunk of a run, as you called it, then take that run. I like for all quarterbacks, pass first if he's open and then run second. But when you do see that big gap, like you said, you have to take it. That gets you a new set of downs. But not only that, from a coaching standpoint, it makes defensive coordinators scratch their head and figure out what they're going to do. And most of the time, that is they have to go to zone if they're scared of him running. And that allows for holes in the defense for you to throw the ball. So those early guys, those young quarterbacks, you say you got to say, hey, look, you're looking to pass it first if he's open quickly, so you don't take a sack and then run second. But always take for sure what they give you.
I like it. And we're going to get to some questions that people might have for you, Coach, momentarily. If you guys do have questions for Coach about the current NFL season, about an upcoming game, or about just football in general, you want to tap into his years of experience successfully helping dial up winning programs as well as play calls for the Patriots. Drop your questions over on the YouTube comments. You can do that by going over to YouTube. Sharp Football Analysis is what you want to search for, and you can get your questions up in the chat there, and I will process them. A couple more for me, Coach, though. I know that we saw the game unfold. I don't know if you were predicting the Bills would have success against the Chiefs and win that game or not, but you now certainly believe that the Bills are in the driver's seat for the number 1 seed in the AFC, which would mean first round bye, which is so vitally important. They did have a home game against the Chiefs in the playoffs last year, and they blew that opportunity. But you believe that they might reverse that, get that first round bye this year, and have home field throughout. Why is that?
Yeah, I think again, you just look at the schedule, and I think KC's been winning, but they've been winning close games, and when you look at the touchdown ratio to interception ratio of Patrick Mahomes, the NFL has shown that can't be sustained, that winning rate with that ratio of touchdowns to interceptions. And people are talking about their defense and this, that, and the other. What you saw in the Buffalo game was either Buffalo figuring something out, or you saw finally some weak chinks that they found in that defense that everybody could take advantage of. And teams have been doing some good things, but communication of the Chiefs back end, you could just see watching the game wasn't where it needed to be. For instance, when they give Chris Jones on the front, when they give him free reign to go wherever he wants, and I don't mean just line up there, but say line up as a defensive tackle, but loop all the way around in an unplanned stunt or anything like that. They have a call they give to the guys in the back, the linebackers, so they know to fill that lane because he might be leaving it. And they didn't do that Sunday for the first time in a long time. So there was some miscommunication there. Also, when Buffalo did a good job of motioning guys and stacking guys against man. And when you do that, that creates a little chaos on the back end on especially any kind of banjo coverage where they got to switch and one takes the inside receiver and one takes the outside. They did a good job of stacking the guys. And all Kansas City's been good at that, but there were some communication problems again in that area on the back end that allowed for Buffalo to run guys wide open that shouldn't have been in man-to-man. They stacked them and ran them 3 and 4 yards down the field before they broke, so the defenders had to back off, and you just saw easy plays by Shakir that they used him well in. So I think that's going to be something that other teams pick on a little bit. But again, you go back to it, and Kansas City has 3 losable games. They have losable games against the Chargers, Houston, and Pittsburgh. And I know you could say, well, those are losable. Would they lose all 3 of them? No, but to me, they could also easily swap out one of those and lose against Denver. Now go over and look at, and if you look at the Buffalo side of things and you look at what they've got left, I think Buffalo's got a tough one too at times, but they get New England twice. That's 2 wins. Just book that. The Jets, book that as a win. They play San Francisco at home. I'm calling that a win. And then you got the Rams at the Rams, and then you got at Detroit. That's going to be a tough one. But then you look at those and you add them all up. I think Buffalo could get to 14 wins, probably 13 for sure. I think Kansas City gets to 13. They've got head to head. So if they win 14 or if they win 13, I think they're going to win the bye in the first round, and I think they're going to have home field throughout. And I think this time, I think they have finally figured out Kansas City. I loved what Josh Allen did on downs when Kansas City went man. He didn't stand back there and try to throw the football. He immediately took the first gap that was open and took off running, just like you saw on that 4th down play where he ran the 26-yard touchdown.
Yeah, that play was a backbreaker. I was on a Kansas City Chiefs in a teaser, and obviously that was the play that cost me that teaser. So I don't love that play, but if I was on the Bills side of things, it's absolutely a slam dunk, right decision for him to run with the football. Such an X factor when he decides to do that. All right, Coach. Couple of questions here in the chat. We'll get to one, then I want to show you a quick video. Better Boss asks, is the league catching up to Jayden Daniels? I believe that Jayden Daniels is still probably not quite 100% from the injury before. He's also not seeming to run as freely. So even if he's sort of close to 100%, did he sort of learn his lesson and he's not wanting to run quite as freely? That was one of the things that set him apart dramatically in the early part of the season, as well as at LSU, was just his ability to take off and just go without like fear, and he was taking too many hits when he would do those types of things. It was always going to be, when is he going to get injured? But now he's not nearly running as much. And you also have the handicap of Cliff Kingsbury and the way that his offenses tend to slow down later on in the season. I wonder if you can talk to a little bit about what you're seeing in Jayden Daniels' game over the last couple of weeks as compared to earlier on in the season. Is it injury related or is it something else? And then, what you've noticed about Cliff Kingsbury over the course of his tenure there, both with the Cardinals when he was calling plays and now maybe what we can get as a future indicator here with the Commanders.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right on Jayden Daniels. When he had the ability to free run and he felt comfortable and wasn't injured, that changes things. And I think people will continue to underrate his ability to run and do things with the football. He doesn't look like much. I mean, Josh Allen is an imposing figure, and he's built to run. Jayden Daniel, you just can't get over the fact, like, I don't think that guy can run through an arm tackle or anything like that, and he continues to do so. But with his injury, that's severely hurt their chances of moving the football like they did early on. Now, some of that, like you said, falls back on Cliff Kingsbury. And what I see from Coach Kingsbury when I look at what he does, I think there's different kinds of philosophies on running your offense and planning your offense. I think during camps and in the summer, I think he comes up with a lot of creativity. He does a lot of things, and then he installs those things, and I don't think he adds to them or changes them much during the season, and that allows other teams to find big tendencies and find big patterns in his play calling. And not just that, but they go, okay, we're 8 games in. This is what he's going to do. There's not going to be any twists. There's not going to be any little add-ons to the offense or little new plays in a certain package of a formation. And he sticks with that. And I think that's what you've seen when he was with Arizona. Teams catch up with that because there is no new creativity and there is no change. There is no add-ons to certain formations or packages. And when I'm a firm believer in, you have to continue to add on all year long. Not only does that it helps keep your own team when you're at practice. They know something new is going to be added every week. That heightens their focus before they walk out for practice. But certainly it gives the defense, when you twist or tweak a package or a formation or run a play off of a play that you've run a lot, the defense's eyes see one thing and they react to what they've seen on film and think you're going to do. And all of a sudden there's something else to it and a guy's running wide open, or there's something else to it and that influence block isn't an influence block and you run behind that anymore. So I just think Cliff Kingsbury doesn't continue to add on and change things as the season rolls on like he probably needs to.
Yeah, that defense is conditioned all through film study, all through the week. It's like, here's the main things we need to focus on, what we need to take away. And so if you show some candy and then do something a little bit different off of it, it could have a major impact, especially later on in the season. I assume that was one thing that you made an emphasis when you were, coaching a 9-time state champion, in terms of going up against some of those schools later on in the year that knew you well, and making sure you kind of came up with a lot of wrinkles for them.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to. I mean, I make it a point every week to add or change 2 or 3 concepts to what we're doing. And at the same time, we'll play teams twice. Sometimes we play them in the regular season, play them in the playoffs. Well, you play the teams in the NFL in your division twice every year. So if you're not adding or changing that second time around, it's a lot different. So guys like, the guys like Jayden Daniels, especially a young quarterback, needs those additional things, need those changes, need to show the same play and there's something completely different, because maybe, and he doesn't seem to suffer from this, it takes him a half second longer, not even a tenth of a second longer to process what he's seeing. And that add-on plays, that same look, the same motion, the same shifts, and then the motion create, when you add that extra play, create that extra 0.1 or 0.2 seconds he needs to process and make that play.
Yeah, and I'm looking. This is probably a reason I'll pull up the numbers momentarily, that we do see a lot more of the divisional rematch games where you play a team a second time in the same year tend to go under the total a little bit more, as opposed to the first time of the year that they play their opponent. Those games have a little bit higher scoring, is because some of those offensive coordinators are not trying to be as creative in that second game. They're doing a lot more of the same things that they were doing in the first game, and the defenses have now prepared to stop or slow those things down. And so there's a little bit of a need to be more creative. Matt, I want to go to the video from Justin Tucker and introduce this next topic to Coach. Why don't you go ahead and play this, Coach? This is Justin Tucker following the game where he obviously missed a couple of field goals. And the funny part about this video that I want to mention in preface is that his opponent, the kicker for the Pittsburgh Steelers, Chris Boswell, went 6 for 6 on field goals, made all 6 field goals. So now, Matt, roll this clip.
There was a game here yesterday, too. Was the surface an issue at all?
I wouldn't say the surface was an issue, but it wasn't ideal. That's something that we make it a point to account for by going out there in pregame warm-ups and, getting our feet under us, figuring out what the wind may be doing. But we've dealt with that plenty of times here, elsewhere, at home. And then throughout the course of the game, the most action takes place in between the ashes, and it naturally just gets chewed up.
So here you've got Justin Tucker, who has struggled this year. now is sort of, I don't want to say he's like completely casting blame, but he's certainly not being very complimentary about the field surface. Whereas the guy on the same exact field surface is banging through 6 for 6. What do you do and what do you say to a kicker that seems to have lost his confidence? I know that they went through some mechanics and they tried to tweak a couple of things. I know that he seems to have struggled. I saw some stats posted online. Since 2022, he's been struggling, and that's when he's gotten this certain punter who's been holding for his kicks. And should they notice this, and should they make any adjustments? I went through at 2:30 last night, Coach, and was watching. I was about to bring a film cut up of the misses from Justin Tucker and what I could identify, but I'm not going to do their homework for them. I'm sure they're looking at those types of things. But kicking is such a psychologically important position. You must be sound psychologically if you're going to have success kicking. And it seems like a lot of these guys that have had success, maybe not as much as Justin Tucker has in the past, but anybody that's had success, once they get a little bit older and start missing a few, they're like, oh no, am I going to be taken out the pasture here in a second? Like, what's going on? And then they seem to just go downhill. This is very rare. I think there's been one or two instances, maybe it was like Nick Folk that I saw struggle and then come back and end up being a little bit better. But what do you say to a kicker, and what have you noticed from Justin Tucker? Because it's certainly impacting their ability to win some of these games, because they had in the past been able to count on these points, and now they absolutely can't. He's a liability.
Yeah, I think you hit it right on the head, and the label right there says that he's lost his confidence. The answer is yes. The only way he answers that question like he did when the other kicker is 6 for 6 is he's lost confidence and he doesn't want it to be him, and he's making it something else. Go watch an NFL practice and watch the kickers. They're on their own field, and the kicker's kicking field goals, and the punter's punting it back to them, and they're over there by themselves. So they don't get to feel the team camaraderie and uplifting when they're over there joking around and just making them feel comfortable. They're always having to deal with their own psychological problems. Justin Tucker obviously has never had a problem with it. He seems like an extremely confident guy. But this shows that he lacks that confidence, because you don't say what he said when the other kicker went 6 for 6 unless you don't have confidence and you are placing blame on something else. The reality of kicking is that it is so minuscule in the miss and make. And what I mean by that is it's always about the plant foot. I would invite anybody that's going back and looking at his kicks that he's missed. If he's pulling them to the left, look at his plant foot, and it's probably planting an inch closer to the ball horizontally. And if he's pushing it, it's probably planting a quarter of inch away from the ball horizontally. If he's kicking it short, he's planting too short vertically. If he's kicking it too low, he's putting his plant foot too far vertically past the ball. And I think he needs to remember that, but kickers don't. They just don't think about that. And they think about me, and they think about their mechanics. But to me, it's almost always footwork. And then when they mess their footwork up, they lose confidence. Then they start trying 15 other different things. And that's why I think very rarely do you ever see them get it back. When in reality, it's usually not the holder, not the center, not anything. That gets in their head a little bit, but it's simply their plant foot. And for Justin Tucker and the Ravens, because I'm a big Lamar Jackson fan, big Ravens fan, for them not to have him, I mean, they're going to need him to be more consistent, or they don't have a chance of winning the Super Bowl, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you hate to say it, but you need some of those points when you must be able to count on it. And we're seeing kicking contribute more to scoring for certain teams and at certain points in time, and especially late in the season when you're outdoors and the weather elements are there and more present and more of an issue. And think about the other teams in the AFC, the upper echelon, the Buffalo Bills in Buffalo, the Kansas City Chiefs in Kansas City, the Baltimore Ravens in Baltimore. I mean, these are not like Miami. This is not out in Arizona in a dome. This is not in San Francisco. This is cold. This is windy. These are conditions that, if you can't make them in ideal conditions, and now all of a sudden the weather's factoring in and you're trying to figure out the wind speed and make adjustments, and that's going to be a problem down the stretch. So I would love nothing more than he get himself fixed. And to your point, I agree it's vital. I saw on some of this film that I was watching the misses to his left. He had several of them in the game against the Pittsburgh Steelers, and it absolutely did seem like that plant foot was a little bit too close to the football for what I was seeing in terms of like when I was watching his makes versus his misses. I wish that I had the ability or the time to like cut them all up together one by one. But I was just watching one after the other chronologically. At any rate, let's go to a question that Brian brought up about Aaron Rodgers. And I'm going to talk about the Jets momentarily, but if you look at after you leave, Coach, I'm going to talk about the ownership and issues there. But if you look at Aaron Rodgers and his play, you and I both know, Coach, that there's not a single more important position than the quarterback. We're talking about kickers here, but the quarterback is the most important position. Quarterback dictates wins or losses more than anybody else. The passing game is far more important than the run game. Offense is far more important than defense. And you have a quarterback in Aaron Rodgers who is not performing well enough, and it is costing the New York Jets games. And as the New York Jets are losing games with expectations up here, and they're losing and they're losing and they're losing and they're falling shorter and shorter and shorter of those expectations, they're firing this guy. They're firing that guy. I mean, he's getting multiple guys fired. He's gotten his old head coach fired. Then he's gotten his offensive coordinator fired. Then he's gotten his GM fired because Aaron Rodgers is not playing well enough to win games. What do you think about his fundamentals? Have you noticed anything about Aaron Rodgers specifically that is contributing to his poor play, which is now costing people their jobs?
Well, yeah, absolutely. If you look at Aaron Rodgers when he was in his prime, which wasn't very long ago. I mean, 4 years ago, the guy was the MVP, I think. But he's never focused on the fundamentals of footwork or throwing the ball on balance and things like that. He hasn't had to because he's probably the greatest talent, the most talented quarterback that's ever played the game. Now, talent and leadership and all those things and offensive coordinators all factor into being completely great. But he has not had to do that. I wrote an article, and I can't remember if it was for you or somebody else 4 years ago, at the tail end of his MVP. And I said, if you watch, Aaron Rodgers will start a decline. And I was right then. It's easy to come on here and say, hey, I told you so. But he's going to start a decline because his footwork is not as quick. As you get older, as we know, Father Time is undefeated. Everybody talks about that. But his footwork has never had to be good. He's always, where he's made his living, Aaron Rodgers, is not the kind of scramble that that Caleb Williams did in college, where it's back and forth till a guy's wide open 9 seconds later. It's been escape the pocket, 4 steps later, the ball's out. So still fairly quick, even when he's had to. And he could do that because he didn't have to get set and throw the ball. He could throw it off his back foot falling away and still put it where he wanted to. As he's gotten older, his footwork is not as good. He's a little slower. After his Achilles injury, he doesn't feel like he can escape the pocket nearly as much, which is where he's made a huge living, because when you leave that pocket, your receiver, if they're well-versed in their craft, changes their direction to immediately go with you. And the defensive back is a half second late in seeing that, and that gets guys more open. I would venture to say he's made as many throws in his last few years at Green Bay off structure, off the pocket, not 1, 2, 3 step throw than he did inside structure, but they weren't as out of structure as people like to think of a Caleb Williams when he was in college. And because Aaron has never had to have the fundamentals of 1, 2, 3, footwork in the pocket, slide right, slide left, because he's never had to do that, I don't think he does do that. And it falls back to he doesn't have that fundamental. And so he's either got to get rid of the ball in his brain. He's got to get rid of the ball so I don't get hit or get hurt, because I can't escape. And if you look at it, his yards per attempt this year is lower than it has been any time in his career when he's been a starter. And I think that falls back to those fundamentals. I think it falls back to he can't get out of the pocket 4 steps and make that throw because he just doesn't have it in his footwork and in his balance anymore. And I think that's what you're seeing. I think unless he was with a team that has a tremendous offensive line and tremendous play action ability, I think that you're seeing probably the last year of Aaron's career.
No, and you were right. Not just the yardage is down, Coach, on his yards per attempt, but you were right in thinking that his air yards is down as well. He is throwing a much higher rate, and this is some of the stuff I was going to be talking about later. He is throwing a much higher rate of passes short of the line of scrimmage. He's not throwing the ball 10 plus yards down the field. Even the last month of the season, I was very critical of him midway through the season. On this show, I did an episode where I talked about what Aaron Rodgers needs to do a little bit more of. And they brought over Davante Adams. It might have been after the first game that Davante was here. And what they needed to do was to get Aaron Rodgers to hang in that pocket a little bit longer and try to push the ball down the field. And he needed to feel enough confidence in the state of his health, in the willingness to take a hit, and the desire to push the ball down the field. But so much of what he's doing right now, Coach, is getting rid of that ball super quick behind the line of scrimmage before any pressure even comes. He has one of the lowest pressure rates in the NFL. He has one of the shortest time to throws, but he's not pushing the ball down the field at all. And you and I both know, if you don't create explosives on offense, and the only thing that they seem to be able to do to create explosives is to hope that Breece Hall, whether it's a run play or a short dump off, can break something. If you don't have explosives, it's very hard to matriculate the ball down the field, even if it's only 70 yards now that they get the kickoffs on the 30, to do that with sustained success, converting third down after third down. You've got to skip third downs, or you got to get some big chunk plays of 10 to 20 yards in order to get yourself in scoring territory. And with Aaron Rodgers just being so fearful of taking hits, and to your point, his efficiency off mark, if you get him off his spot in the pocket and you make him roll out a little bit, his accuracy is way down. His desire to make those types of throws is way down. His throwaway rate is way up, because he just doesn't want to hold on to the ball long enough as he's scrambling out to try to accurately hit a guy down the field. And he's just more inclined to, let me throw it away so I don't have to take the hit from the backer or the end who's chasing me. So I tend to agree. It is probably the beginning of the end, but great insight from Coach, guys, as to some of the issues with Aaron Rodgers' fundamentals and why it's impacting him more than some other quarterbacks at this stage in his career, because his fundamentals never really were on point like some of the other NFL greats have been. He's just made up so much with his talent. Let's see.
Can I add one other thing? If you look at Aaron Rodgers right now through all the games they've played, he is the fourth worst in the league on completions above expected, right ahead of Anthony Richardson's, who is atrocious at minus 10%. Spencer Rattler and Cooper Rush. That's all Aaron Rodgers is ahead of in completions above expected. And I've found a direct correlation. You just cannot win in the NFL if you're below completion expectation, if you're below the zero line. It's just incredibly difficult to win.
Yeah, absolutely. Your most important position in football. Brian says, excellent insight, Coach. Thanks for that answer. Q Jones was talking about some of those scatter plots that I showed, man zone splits with Lamar Jackson, said that those were super helpful. Exile mentions that the footwork definitely impacted potentially with his Achilles injury. Cousins already a statue, so less overall detriment to Cousins' style as opposed to what we're seeing with Aaron Rodgers. Okay, a couple more quick ones, Coach, and then we'll let you go. Thanks for your time as always. What do the Cowboys need to do for their head coach next year? What direction do you think that they turn to? We've seen a few years now, Mike McCarthy. What do you think that they should do?
I think they need to. I think the number one thing they need to do is restore some discipline in the organization. And if you look at CeeDee Lamb on the sideline and you look at those kinds of things, what that does is you're like, well, that's just some NFL guys. What it does to me is it leads back to discipline on the field. It leads back to, are you in your right spot when the ball snapped on defense? Do you have a coach that holds you accountable? Do you have a coach that inspires other players to hold them accountable? Do you get the pre-snap penalties on either side of the ball as a result of that lack of discipline? I think that's one thing they need to go for. And then obviously they need a coach that values the running game enough, or maybe that's Jerry and Steven that didn't go out and make that run at Derrick Henry this off season. But as you can see, with one of the worst run games, and I'm a passing guy, and I believe in play action. I believe you can play action even without a running game, and it's still extremely beneficial. But you need a run game of some sort, some threat to help you, and they have to have a coach that values that enough to push Jerry and Steven Jones to go out and get them somebody in the run game that can help them out. But most of all, maybe they need some creativity on offense. I know their defense looks really bad right now, and if you look at the home games, but I think they've got some pieces in place that are really good. They've shown the ability, obviously, in the last couple of years with basically the same guys to be able to get it done. But when your offense is putting you in bad situations or not keeping the ball, that makes it tougher on defense. You got to trot out there for many more plays and much more often without much rest. And that's kind of old school thinking, but that's where they are. I think you can go and look, and you can go get, you can go get the offensive coordinator for the Rams. I think that would be a good move, because I think hopefully he's going to bring some of what Matt Campbell's inspired, which is a player's coach with accountability. I think is there. There's very few coaches that can do that. I think I think Bill Belichick would be a guy that could come in if Bill would hire a really good offensive coordinator and just do the defense, have a defensive coordinator, but oversee that defense. I think that's a guy that could do that with. I'm not completely against a Robert Saleh. I think he got a bad deal in New York. I don't think he's a bad option to take a look at either, but they've got to instill some more discipline in that organization from top to bottom, some more accountability in that organization from top to bottom. And then they've got to be better on deals. When Jerry was saying that he was, we're still all in a couple weeks ago on trying to make this season work, and he goes out and trains like a fourth round draft choice for I think it was Mingo, the Carolina Panthers guy. I'm like, really? That's your answer? The guy's like the fourth worst analytics receiver in the league. I mean, I think they could have walked in. They could have went downtown Dallas on the tollway and picked out a guy that would have been just as good as him and not paid anything for him. But until they get a coach that holds them accountable and has some discipline, and also at the same time gets some input on who they want to coach in that program, in that organization as well, I think they're going to have problems.
We'll get you out of here on this one, Coach. Alex Petway asked a little bit about Patrick Mahomes. His specific question, can you help us, Coach, understand the struggles of Mahomes and his inconsistent accuracy on passes 25-plus yards down the field? What is going on with Patrick Mahomes as it relates to what you have seen from his inability to consistently push the ball down the field, to have some of that explosion? Andy Reid's always been excellent at taking easy passes for quarterbacks to make at a high rate and then generating a lot of yak after those catches. But they're struggling a little bit with the deeper stuff this year. Is it the receivers? Is it Mahomes himself? Have you noticed anything there?
Yeah, I think it's a couple things. One, if you look at the Xavier Worthy play, he caught the ball against Buffalo for like 30 yards down the field, but he had his foot out of bounds. He was dragging both feet 3 yards inbounds before the ball ever got there. And you see that, and now it's like, oh, that's why they're not trying to do him more on deep routes. I don't think they trust him. And if you go, well, that's just one play. If you look, it's not hard for receivers on deep routes. They've got to go to a spot. And what I mean by that spot is they've either got to go, their route is either designed to go outside the safety or inside the safety on deep routes, or stay down the sidelines and keep 3 yards between you and the sideline. And I doubt that they have anybody that they're confident enough to do that. And when they don't do it that much in practice because they're working on all their short stuff, then Mahomes isn't getting to practice those throws nearly as much. Also in practice, you're also obviously never live, and he never gets to practice those under duress. And right now he's throwing those deeper passes under a little bit more duress than he ever has. And so with that, not used to that pressure on those throws, it's a lot easier to make those throws as an NFL quarterback when you've got your feet set, balance, and you can take your 6-inch step into that throw and make that throw. And when you can't do that, or when you're not used to it, and certainly you're not going to let anybody near Patrick Mahomes in practice for fear of hurting a thumb, an elbow, a wrist, a shoulder, or whatever, you're not going to be able to do that. That lack of practice against that, and that lack of calling it more in games simply because you don't trust the receivers that can go deep. I think that's what you're seeing. I think you're seeing when he has to do it, he's not able to do it. And let's also fall back on the Aaron Rodgers thing. He's never been a fundamentally sound quarterback with his footwork outside the pocket, and hasn't had to be because the guy's a magician. But as he gets older, you need to be a little bit more. And until he figures that out, I think he's going to struggle a little bit. Now, don't get me wrong. I still think Mahomes is the best. And if anybody can pull a rabbit out of a hat at any time, it's him. But I think these things slowly get to you. And I think defenses are catching up to their offense a little bit more. And they're not scared he's going to throw it deep. And over time, that's what's making them play the underneath a lot better, limit their yak. And that's why you're looking at his touchdown to interception ratio being like it is.
Yeah, it'll be fascinating to see how they perform down the stretch. They've got added new weapons at receiver with Juju and DeAndre Hopkins, and it'll be interesting to see how DeAndre and Juju work into this offense down the stretch to pair with Kelsey, who's getting up there in age, and their health more than anything as we enter this late stretch of the season run. Coach, thanks as always for spending some time with us here on a Tuesday, getting some insight, as you mentioned, as these teams are heading down to the playoff stretch. It's fascinating as always. I know the listeners love having you answer some of their questions. So they're really excited at the opportunity to be able to ask some. Hopefully we'll get you on board one more time here before we get into the playoffs, and we can talk a little bit about some of the playoff predictions as we get into the late stages of December and early January. But thanks again for the time. Have a great Thanksgiving next week, and we look forward to talking to you again soon.
Hey, thanks for having me. Honored. Everybody knows I know you're the best in the business, so to be on your show is awesome. And I'm not sure who loves the NFL more, me or you, but we'll call it a toss up and leave it there.
There we go. Nobody has to win that one. Thanks, Coach. Guys, thank you so much for your comments and your questions for Coach. As a reminder, go over to the Sharp Football Analysis channel on YouTube. This is where you can ask us your questions. Make sure you give us a like, a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. All of that helps us a ton as we're trying to build the channel and continue to get some great guests in here like Coach. Really, really awesome interview with him. Okay, before we move on, I do want to mention real quick, we are doing, you've seen it up in the top left-hand corner of your screen, we are doing a special discount for anybody who either didn't get involved in Free Week or still wants to get involved down the stretch of the code SHOW65. As I mentioned, we went 27-19 on all Free Week plays. Last week is 59%. Would love it if it was 75%, but a winning week is a winning week. That brings our record to $100 better, winning $10,150 if you're betting on everything that we have given you so far this season. So we're giving 65% off a rest of season betting package that has already been reduced in price. And we are doing it the rest of this week. So you'll see this advertisement again on Friday. If you want to get involved down the stretch, that drops the per week price down to $40 per week. So use the code SHOW65. Couple of nice pizzas. A couple of nice pizzas, $40. I'm saying nice pizzas. That's the kind that I like. Is a nice pie. Love those from time to time. About $22 a piece from some of the good Italian restaurants where I live. Couple bucks, $40 per week. That's what the price drops it down to. So use the code SHOW65. We are in the midst of our best season that we've had on record. $100 better, up over $10,000. Get involved if that works out for you. I'm going to talk about the state of the Jets, Matt. Let's go to the next topic. So we just saw, and I'm reacting to it live, the New York Jets decide to fire GM Joe Douglas. And this has been a cascading impact. We first see that they fire Robert Saleh, and then the team is terrible since they fired Robert Saleh, and they promoted their coach. Then they decide to change their play caller, and that doesn't work either. And then they decide to fire GM Joe Douglas, and I'm guessing that that's not going to work so well either. And the reason is because there's a common theme threading through all of this, and he's not getting enough of this blame. And if it was Jerry Jones, he would get all the blame. But that is the owner, Woody Johnson. And Woody Johnson has been at the core of this whole time. It's Woody Johnson's team that is one of the worst franchises in all of professional sports. I'm looking at the stats here, and where is it? I got a stat here. When's the last time this team has made to the playoffs? I don't know where it is. I got a stat. I'll have to find it in a little bit here. They've got a 14-year playoff drought, which is one of the longest in professional sports. This team always is struggling, and it's hilarious to me that a guy would say that he's got his most talented roster ever and decides to push his chips all into the table when that team is being led by a quarterback who is as old as Aaron Rodgers is and who is coming off of Achilles surgery. How you think that this is the time to push all your chips in, and you're making desperation move after desperation move, bringing in all of Aaron Rodgers' old teammates, going after Devontae Adams and trading to acquire him midseason, making all of these sorts of moves that reek of total desperation and trying to acquiesce to a specific player. I never understood the vision there. So I know that Aaron Rodgers is the popular whipping boy, and I've certainly done my fair share of saying that he needs to improve in his ability to stand in the pocket. Easy for me to say, of course, but looking around the league and comparing him to the rest of the quarterbacks and where he's ranking and how he's struggling, this is a clear thing that he needs to improve upon. And I've pointed out specifics with his game that needs to improve if the Jets are going to have some success. So this is not just big picture throw Aaron Rodgers under the bus. There are things that he absolutely must improve, but this is a vision from the ownership on down that is to blame. And this team has struggled for years and years, and they're in the biggest market in the NFL, right? New York City. And yet they cannot figure out how to build a winning team. It's just so ironic that we're in these big markets, and if you have a team that's halfway decent, you're going to get a ton of interest in them. We see the Jets get put on prime time left and right for 2 years now because they signed Aaron Rodgers. They're not halfway decent. They're not halfway decent last year. They're not halfway decent this year. So it's quite frustrating seeing them being given all these flowers and rewarded in the offseason and talked about in the capacity that they are, all because the owner is trying to load up on a team that is nowhere near the caliber that they should be getting so much praise for. Aaron Rodgers, I laid out the specifics of things that he needs to do. Coach Kelley talked about some of the things that he doesn't think Aaron Rodgers is going to be able to change. I personally don't think he's going to change his style. As the season is a lost year, they sit at 3-8, and Aaron Rodgers is not going to say, you know what, now's the time for me to stand in this pocket and take some more hits. Now it's we're moved to December now. Now's the time as the team is spiraling out of control that I'm going to have to hang in the pocket a little bit longer and take some of these hits in order to get the ball down the field. He's not going to. You watch that game between the Bengals and the Chargers on Sunday Night Football, where you got Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert going toe to toe and taking all those hits. That's not what we're going to see from Aaron Rodgers. He is not going to sit in there, throw the ball under duress, and take those hits. He's trying to get rid of that football. He's trying to preserve himself. This season is not going to end well. And I don't get all these desperate moves in the middle of the season. If anything, to me, all of this desperation is from Woody Johnson is going to make it harder to build a winner in the future, in my opinion. It's going to show another coach that might be coming in here. This is a very unstable place to be. You got all these people getting fired and canned, and I don't know what's going to happen if I decide to go coach for the New York Jets. And so I just don't think it's a very stable atmosphere for a new prospective coach to want to walk into and take on that role. They don't have a future for a quarterback. They don't have an owner that has a good vision as to how to win football games. And they have an owner who appears to be very much loose with the trigger and wanting to just make all these moves in the middle of the season. So I'm not here to say that this team is going to lose forever, of course, but I just find it hard to believe that Woody Johnson is suddenly going to attract like the best and premier coach unless he overpays for him. It's always possible if a guy wants to come here and get overpaid. But if you're a really good coach, you're like the top coach in this market, and you've got options, I just don't see how you're choosing the New York Jets to be your destination. Exile says Saleh looks better and better with each loss too. I mentioned this before. I want to mention this again. Robert Saleh got these guys to play for him. He got this defense to play with a certain level of aggression that is absolutely required, especially later on in the season when your record isn't perfect and your offense stinks. It is very, and we always were wondering, me and my betting group, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, last year, okay, when is the defense finally going to call it quits, right? Because it's an effort thing. When are they finally going to say, enough is enough? We're not going to try to win the game for us like we've had to do all other 16 weeks. Defenses, for the most part, can't win games in the NFL. The rules are so slanted for offenses to have success that most of these guys, their effort ends up shutting off at a certain point in time. Saleh somehow got these guys to keep playing for longer than most any other coaches that I've seen. Is he perfect with X's and O's? No. Is he great on offense? No. Is he a genius coach? No. But he got the defense to play hard in spite of some of the worst quarterbacking that we saw. The dead nut worst quarterbacking that we saw in the NFL for several years. He got his defense to continue to play hard for much of the season. And we have seen them now just quit. I mean, just it seems like they don't care as much on that side of the football. They decided to go out and practice in their pads, and it was going to always be a challenge going up against a quarterback like Anthony Richardson. But do you really think that, on the offensive side of the ball, Aaron Rodgers is going to step in there and take more hits? No. Do you really think this defense all of a sudden is going to start playing with ridiculous aggression? Their GM is gone. They don't have a GM. They don't have their head coach. I just find it hard to believe that that's going to be the case for the Jets down the road. I can only see this team not turning it around, depending upon their schedule, but still struggling down the stretch. Jets are the perfect destination, says Bojo. Okay, next topic, Matt. All right, we're going to get to the last topic, and then we're going to get to strength of schedule. And this is Brian Daboll. So Brian Daboll, I just want to sort of set the record straight here. He has won two ways in the NFL. He has won by elevating the upside of an elite quarterback in Josh Allen, and he has won by figuring out how to mask the weaknesses of a mediocre to bad quarterback and still get to the playoffs in Daniel Jones. Two totally different strategies and ways that you have to win. And he's done both of those things in the span of just a couple of years. And it's a rare thing to be able to do. I don't think people realize that before Brian Daboll in 2020 took over for Josh Allen was one of the least accurate quarterbacks in the NFL. And because he struggled throwing the football, that team was a run-first team. That team was a team that did not want to throw the ball on first down. And Daboll finally was able to convince Sean McDermott to try a new approach in the 2020 season. And they came out and surprised the entire world by passing the ball on early downs, by getting efficiency with that pass game. When the defense is playing the run, we're going to pass. We're going to try to avoid third downs. And the 2020 season was the best season ever for Josh Allen. Statistically, it was the best season that he's ever had. Yards per attempt, EPA, success rate, you name it, completion rate. Everything was at the peak in that 2020 season. Any owner with a young quarterback who probably not firing your coach, right? If your team is successful and your team is probably going to be successful with a veteran quarterback. It's hard for a rookie quarterback to have a ton of success. We've seen glimpses of it, right, with Jayden Daniels, obviously. But most of these coaches, take a look at the Chicago Bears, right? They fired Matt Eberflus. Who would you want to come in to help try to work with a quarterback like a Caleb Williams, who obviously had high promise, but hasn't been able to really deliver at the NFL level? And you've got a guy like a Brian Daboll who just turned around Josh Allen. Now, I'm not saying that Caleb Williams is going to meet the same level of final ultimate hit, ceiling as Josh Allen did. But the point is, he turned around a quarterback who was highly touted. He also was able to win with a quarterback in Daniel Jones, who is not a good quarterback. And they did that in a variety of ways, which I've said ad nauseum before, but they reduced the target depth. They ran the ball more in the red zone. They used Daniel Jones' legs, and they completely masked the fact from most everybody out there when the Giants were winning games and going 9-7, I think, and going to the playoffs and winning a playoff game, that Daniel Jones was having one of his worst seasons statistically. They masked that entirely because they were able to win games in different ways that didn't emphasize Daniel Jones. And that's what helped get Daniel Jones his new contract, because ownership and the general manager wasn't realizing that they were winning these games despite Daniel Jones absolutely sucking for the most of the season in that year. And they still gave him the contract because they had a winning record. So I don't know what the future is going to be here for Brian Daboll in New York. But if you are looking for a new head coach after you're making the move to Tommy DeVito, right? Some people out there, you guys can comment in the chat as to what you think is going to happen with Brian Daboll. Do you think that he's going to stay another year? Do you think he's going to be fired middle of the season, over the next several weeks? Or you think he's going to get fired in the offseason? You can give me your opinions in the chat as to where you think he's going to go. But the fact of the matter is that I saw somebody say on X yesterday that they went with Tommy DeVito because he's the more popular quarterback, and he's more popular than Drew Lock. And we saw how much ownership put an emphasis on having somebody who's popular, especially after losing Saquon Barkley. Saw that in the offseason Hard Knocks. This got to be one of the dumbest things that I have thought, that they would choose the backup quarter who's going to start based on popularity. And this team's record is horrendous. There's absolutely no reason that either the GM or the head coach is going to care who's the more popular quarterback. You think anybody's going to come to the Giants game when they're losing games just because Tommy DeVito is in the stands? And maybe some people from his family, but just as many people are going to leave and say, we're not sitting here in the cold weather in December to watch Tommy DeVito play. So you're not having a net positive in fan influx because Tommy DeVito is now quarterbacking for the New York Giants. I think Brian Daboll is going to try to win games here with whatever quarterback that he's got, because some people are insinuating that he's playing for his job. And I absolutely think that some of these games are going to be important, and you can't show that the team is quote unquote quit on you, because that's not going to reflect well for next season. So there's no doubt, while the team might want to tank, like while the GM might want to tank for a better draft pick next year, and deep down in his heart, Brian Daboll would love to have the assurance he's going to coach in 2025 for New York, and he can get a great quarterback. And in which case, if that was 100% true, right, which nobody can say it's 100% true, an owner can tell him his job is safe, but maybe doesn't follow through on it, and the owner can end up doing whatever he wants to do. So there's no doubt that Brian Daboll is going to try to win with whichever quarterback is there, because he has no idea what his status is going to be in the future. But I think that Brian Daboll is going to be a great coach for another quarterback in New York, if that were the case and he stuck around, if ownership allowed him to. Or a great coach for another quarterback somewhere else. I still believe Brian Daboll absolutely knows how to coach, and he's been dealt a pretty rotten hand with the quote-unquote franchise quarterback that he had in Daniel Jones, as well as when Daniel Jones has been hurt, all the different backups that have come through. It's not like the Giants have been a franchise that has had a lot of good health, whether it's along the offensive line, whether it's at the skill position. This team is had some pretty poor health luck as well. So let's see. We got Daboll with Drake May. Wouldn't be shabby either. That's actually a great combination. I would think that Daboll would have a ton of fun with a guy who's got as much arm talent as does Drake May. Nico does say, I wish the Giants would win. Of course, as an Italian Giants fan, here's Matt pulls one up. Nico says, as Italian Giants fan, playing DeVito is cool. I hope Daboll stays. He should be allowed to try and get a real quarterback. I agree 100% with your belief there, Nico. that Daboll should be allowed to stay with a quarterback of their choosing and a clean slate, and let's try to win for a year or two, and then you can move on. Brian Daboll is not like some of these other head coaches that the New York Giants have had in years past, where they're going after this special teams guy or this defensive-minded guy or a lot of these guys who are just pretty terrible overall, and I'm not quite sure how they even got their jobs, like your Joe Judges, etc. Brian Daboll is one of the more creative offensive-minded guys out there. And there's only so many of those in the NFL right now. But, I haven't been very impressed with the ownership there either. Seems like both the New York teams' ownership might be around for a while. Obviously, regarded in league-wide circles for being owners for a while. I guess that's something that's well regarded. Maybe they're good people with the NFL. But in terms of making decisions for helping their teams win, not so much the last several years. That is for sure, and more so in New York with the Jets. At least the Giants, you've got your Eli Manning Super Bowls over the New England Patriots that nobody can ever take away from you. And I'm sure all the Giants fans, Nico included, would be, can always look back on those. But we're talking about trying to bring another one to New York, and you're going to want a good young quarterback and a good play caller to be able to do that. Ron G mentions any thoughts on the Thursday game. So let's pivot over to strength of schedule talk real quick. And then we'll get into the Thursday night game. Matt, why don't you bring up strength of schedule, the first graphic there. Okay, so we're going to look here at on the defensive side of the football. For those of you just joining, I'll explain the graphic to you that you're seeing on your screen right now. And if you're just joining, you don't know what this graphic stands for or means, that also means that you need to go subscribe to the Sharp Football Analysis channel over on YouTube, give us like the show and set your alerts. At the top here, we are looking at defensive efficiency of opponents. And instead of doing year to date, because, weeks 1 to 11, I am now going to be presenting these to you guys in who have I played lately? Because I don't really care so much who you played in week 1 or week 2. I care about who you've played lately to see that shock to your system that might arise for this week 12 game. It's less impactful if you played a couple great teams week 1, 2, and then that's skewing your strength of schedule here in week 12. If you've played crappy teams over the last month or two, I don't care much what you played weeks 1 and 2. So we're removing some of those early weeks. We're focusing on the last 5 games that you played, and then we're looking at who are you going to play next. And so if you look at this, the top graphic is sorted on the defensive side of the football for teams' offenses. So I'll go through and describe some of this quickly here. The Arizona Cardinals, for example, have played the most difficult schedule of defenses from weeks 7 through 11. It's been very tough on Arizona's offense. And if you look at the bottom part of this graphic, the Arizona offense now is going to face a much easier defense than average when they take on the Seattle Seahawks, which is why even though Arizona's on the road in Seattle, this line at a lot of spots is a pick 'em. And in several spots I'm seeing the Arizona Cardinals are actually favored right now, like about Pinnacle and Chris. So it's because Arizona has been playing a brutal schedule, and their offense will look a little bit better against the Seahawks. I know the Seahawks came out of their bye and played the San Francisco 49ers really well. I'm not predicting a Cardinals victory, but I'm just showing that it's going to be easier for their offense against this defense. Same is true for the Dallas Cowboys. So the Dallas Cowboys clearly are dealing with a ton of injuries, and they had a couple of offensive linemen go down last night. So I don't know the exact status as to whether or not those guys will be back, but they're now going up against this Washington Commanders defense, which is not close to the defenses that the Dallas Cowboys have been playing for several weeks. So I've circled them as well. Same is true for the Washington Commanders. I've circled them down there. They have played over the last 5 weeks, the 8th most difficult schedule. Washington's offense has played the 8th most difficult schedule over the last 5 weeks, and now they're playing a well below average defense of the Dallas Cowboys. So Jayden Daniels and the Commanders offense should look a lot better in this spot, which is reflected in the market as they are laying 10.5 points at most spots right now at home against the Dallas Cowboys, which is a massive line for the Commanders. Also, Tommy DeVito. Interesting game for him to be starting as Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense has struggled. Now, Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense certainly has gotten healthier than they were at certain points earlier on in the season. So it's not going to be easy, especially with all the blitzes that they're going to be sending. Tommy DeVito better have his shoelaces tied pretty tightly, got all that cutlets in him from the night before, and be ready to run because he's going to need those wheels against Todd Bowles and that Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense. On the other side of things, we look at offenses that have been playing easy schedules of defenses, but now will play a tough defensive opponent this week. We'll start with the Chicago Bears furthest to the right. Over the last 5 weeks, the Chicago Bears have played the 5th easiest schedule of defenses. And now the offense of the Chicago Bears is going to be going up against the Minnesota Vikings defense, which is obviously creative, blitzes a ton, and gets a lot of pressure. And so it's going to be much more difficult for Caleb Williams this week than, for example, it was against the New England Patriots, etc., Green Bay Packers, etc. We also look at the Minnesota Vikings. That's the game that they are playing the Chicago Bears. It's in Chicago. Minnesota's been playing easier defenses than average, although the Tennessee Titans have a pretty good defense themselves, who the Vikings played last week. Now they're going up against the Bears. The Bears defense, that secondary, we'll see from a player health perspective how they are. But that defense statistically is a little bit better than what the Vikings are accustomed to playing. Also, you've got the Rams going up against Philadelphia Eagles on Sunday Night Football. Much more difficult defense that the Rams are accustomed to playing over the last 5 weeks. And the same is true for the Las Vegas Raiders, who are hosting the Denver Broncos, catching 5 points at home on Sunday afternoon. The Raiders are stepping up in class big time as they're going up against this Denver Broncos defense. All right, next graphic. Here we're looking at the opposite side of the football. So we're looking at the offenses that a defense has played and which teams have played easy offenses, and then which teams this upcoming week is going to be in for a shock to their system. So in a good way, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense should look pretty good. I just mentioned the New York Giants in the last graphic and their offense going up against this Bucs defense. Well, this Bucs defense is going to look pretty good because they have played the number one most difficult schedule in the NFL of opposing offenses the last 5 weeks. And now they're going up against this New York Giants offense, which is down and which is starting Tommy DeVito. So it's going to be fun for Todd Bowles to coach up his unit during practice this week and get them prepared because it's going to be a lot of fun going after Tommy DeVito. Pittsburgh Steelers, they have played a difficult schedule of opposing offenses over the last 5 weeks. Now they have the luxury of going up against the Cleveland Browns on Thursday night, which we will talk about momentarily. Same is true for the Denver Broncos defense, which I just mentioned that game from the Raiders' perspective. The Raiders, this is a double whammy for the Raiders. The Raiders offense has been playing some easy defenses, and now they got to go up against a tough defense. So it's going to be hard for Gardner Minshew on that side of the ball. Meanwhile, the Denver Broncos defense has been playing very difficult offenses, and now they're going up against this weak offense of the Raiders. So that side of the ball, major step up in class for both the major step up in class from what the Raiders offense has been playing, as well as for a step down in class for what the Broncos defense has been playing. So they might look pretty darn good here against that Raiders offense led by Scott and Norv Turner now. Looking at the other side of the ball, we've got the Indianapolis Colts defense, which has been playing an easier than average schedule of opposing offenses over the last month or so. And now they're going up against, of course, the Detroit Lions. So the Detroit Lions, as I'm sitting here now watching it live, this game is taking a little bit of under money and a little bit of Indianapolis Colts money. And some of the 7.5s have shifted at both Chris and Jazz to 7 minus 15. So the 7.5 has shifted a few cents down to 7 minus 15. Indicating a little bit of Colts money is coming into the market there, but it's going to be a big step up in class for their defense. and Jared Goff is going to have to defeat Gus Bradley's cover 3. We also have the Chargers going up against the Baltimore Ravens. The Chargers have been playing one of the easier schedules on average over the last 5 weeks. If I count it off here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8th easiest schedule of opposing offenses for the LA Chargers over the last 5 weeks. Now you're going up against that Baltimore Ravens offense, which is playing, I already talked about this enough at the top, but a defensive scheme in what the Chargers roll out that Lamar Jackson's had a ton of success against, and any other scheme he's had a ton of struggle against. So seems like a good spot for the Ravens offense to get back on track just a few days after struggling mightily against the Pittsburgh Steelers in what is going to be a great Harbaugh Bowl game on Monday Night Football. And then, of course, you've got the Los Angeles Rams. They have played the 3rd easiest schedule of opposing offenses over the last 5 weeks, which has helped their defense look a little bit better. But now they've got to go up against the Philadelphia Eagles. So that's going to be an interesting game to watch and see what happens there. All right. I think that's about, let's talk Thursday Night Football real quick. So I think I mentioned this. I guess if you were part of Free Week, you saw this already. But interesting game here because this is going to be played in Cleveland. And the weather conditions in Cleveland are not looking good. It's still pretty early to get a pure gauge as to how much rain, how much wind, exactly what we're going to get. You can only work with the forecast, and you work with a few different, when you're doing what we do at the level that we do it, you understand which are the most accurate forecast models based upon things that you used before, trial and error. You figure out which models are the most accurate, and you look at a couple of them, and you come up with like what your expectation might be based upon those. But the weathermen themselves are wrong a lot of time. And so it's hard to be right about the weather perfectly at all times. But it certainly looks like there's going to be weather there. Rain and wind. The question is how much rain, how much wind. But the issue becomes in Cleveland, for Cleveland games in Cleveland, it doesn't take much. It doesn't take much to cause issues. I believe, and I didn't tweet this out, but I wrote this down, and I'm trying to search my notes to see if I can find it at the top of my head here with some of my most recent notes, but I may not be able to dig it up here quickly enough. I believe the statistic is something like this. If the wind speed is at least 13 miles per hour, which is not significant. 15 and above is like when it's more significant, but at least 13 miles per hour, and any sort of precipitation, rain, snow, whether it's heavy rain, whether any type of precipitation to kick off in at least 13 mile per hour winds, the games in Cleveland have gone under 12-0 since 2000. And the average total was set around 39 points. And the games were going under by at least 14 points. Now, when you're doing these parameters, obviously, not all of these games are 14 mile per hour wind with a drizzle, right? Some of these games are ridiculous amounts of wind or very heavy rain. So you have to account for that as to why, like, some games that end 3-0 or 9-3 or what have you are going to be skewing some of these numbers where a 39-point average total is falling under by at least 14 points. But the point is, these weather impacts Cleveland more than it does in other cities. You know, weather's going to impact a game in Cleveland more than it would a game in Washington, D.C., Landover, Maryland, or a game in Charlotte, North Carolina, or a game in Nashville, Tennessee, right? That stadium and the way that the wind gets in there and the way that it impacts these totals is more than what it is at most every other stadium out there. So that's the main handicap that I can give you right now. If you want me to break down X's and O's as to like whether or not George Pickens can have success or Jameis Winston is going to be able to get going, or they're going to have success running the football with Nick Chubb after not being able to really get enough accomplished on the ground in the prior couple of games. I think so much of that gets trumped by what these weather conditions end up being. And both of these coaches have a lot of experience dealing with this. Mike Tomlin, Kevin Stefanski, they've been in the AFC North for years. They've been coaching their teams for years. They've played games in this stadium a ton. They will understand how to adapt their game plan to deal with the weather at the time. But that's the reason why this total has dropped down. At some spots, it opened at 41, started quickly getting bet to the under. It got down as low as, I think, 36, and now is back to 36.5. So it looks like the low mark is going to be 36 on this game. And then we're just going to have to see where we go from here from a weather perspective. But no real need to dig in any deeper until we know what the status is. The one thing that I can tell you from a weather perspective is if you just look at a range, it looks like the winds are going to start to go crazy Wednesday night. And it looks like the winds are going to subside around Saturday night. So between Wednesday and Saturday night, we're talking at some points, we are getting wind speeds of 23 miles per hour with gusts into the 40 range. But will we get that actually during the game time? It's hard to say. Whether we'll get that or whether the winds will be at a lower mark, and some of the lower marks are like 14 miles per hour with gusts of 24, which is still certainly part of this criteria is to like, that's pretty darn windy for Cleveland. And then from a rain perspective, again, we're going to get a little rain Wednesday night. It's currently showing that we're going to start getting rain on Thursday at around 4 o'clock, and that rain is going to go all the way through till Saturday night. And at some points, it's going to be heavy rain. At some points, it's going to be lighter rain. It's really hard to say. So what are we, Tuesday at like 1? Oh, God, this show's been going on for a while. 1:47. We got hours to go. We got over 48 hours until kickoff. So just pay close attention to that weather forecast. Yeah, you're right. Unders are 12-0. As it relates to the code, which is the discount code, this is for season long. It'll drop the season long package to $40 per week, but it's for the rest of the season. So we've already discounted the season long packages, prorated them based on how many weeks are left in the season. And now you can get 65% off of that price, dropping the price down to just $40 per week. Use the code SHOW65, but this is not for use on weekly or monthly packages. It's to get on board with us for the rest of the season, which is a part of the year we typically do pretty well, but we shall see how that goes this season. But I love watching and betting on football this time of year. It's by far my most favorite time of year and historically the best time of year. You guys maybe have similar experience, but like football is great as these playoff races are heating up and there's enough data to get some better understanding of these teams. And then there's enough injuries that occur that if you're studying things really well at this time of the year and you're investing the time and effort into it, you're probably going to have a little bit of an edge over some of the bookmakers, because I could guarantee you the bookmakers who have to make numbers for a lot of different sports, some focus a little bit more on football, for example, but they're not processing as much data as like we are and other pros in the market can. And they're also not in tune with all the injuries like we are with a team of people that are feeding us injury related information and researching things. And so there's edges that the bettors are going to have at this time of year over the books if you're like a savvy and put in the amount of work into it. And it's part of the reason I think that we tend to do pretty well down this stretch of the season. And of course, on the Thursday show, so free week was last week. Friday show. Free week was last week. This Friday, we're going to be back with bets, and I'll give you two more of my longest props that I like this week. So we'll do that live on the show on Thursday at noon Eastern. We'll have Ryan back in the flock with his college bets. We'll have Pam. Pam had a great week last week. She'll be back with her NFL bets, props and sides and totals, and I'll be back with a couple of props that are my favorite as well. So until that point in time, good luck with all your research. Keep up the good work from a perspective of liking and retweeting and sharing some of our content over on the Sharp Football Analysis YouTube channel. And we'll see everybody noon on Friday.